You wake up because something is wrong. Not loud, not sudden, just wrong. The air feels thicker than it should be, pressing gently against your chest like a weight that doesn't belong. You're lying in a hammock strung between two trees, the rough fibers scratching faintly against your skin every time you breathe. The forest around you is alive. Insects chirping, leaves whispering, something distant shifting in the dark. Normal sounds, safe sounds. But your body doesn't believe that. Your spine tightens, your breath slows, your ears strain, not because you heard something alarming, but because something is missing. The rhythm of the night feels slightly off, like a song skipping a beat you didn't realize you were following. Then it slips in, soft, dry, repetitive. Koy, Koy, Koy. You don't open your eyes, because your brain has already made the decision for you. It's just a bird, or an insect, or something small and irrelevant that lives out here, something that existed long before you decided to hang a piece of fabric between two trees and call it rest. You've locked your bag. You checked your surroundings. You did everything right. So you stay still. The sound continues. Koy, Koy, Koy. Closer now, not louder, just nearer, as if distance itself has quietly folded. Your heartbeat should be rising. It isn't. In fact, it's slowing, sinking into something heavier, deeper. The more you listen, the more the sound blends into the background, becoming part of the night, part of the rhythm you almost trust. Almost. Then you feel it. A cold touch brushes against your ankle. Not sharp, not painful. Just a faint, unnatural chill, like damp fingers trailing across your skin and pausing, as if testing something. Your toes twitch. Your mind flickers. For a fraction of a second, you hover at the edge of waking. That thin, fragile line where instinct tries to pull you back. You could open your eyes. You could sit up. You could check. Instead, you don't. Because nothing feels urgent enough. Because your body chooses sleep over suspicion. Because whatever touched you didn't hurt. Koy, Koy, Koy. The sound doesn't stop. And neither does it. That hesitation you just felt, that almost awake moment, that was your only warning. Because what you're hearing right now isn't part of the forest. And what just touched your leg has already decided you're not going to wake up. That scenario, that quiet, almost forgettable mistake, that's not fiction. That's how encounters with something known as Phi Kong Koy usually begin. Welcome back, or, more accurately, welcome to a file you probably shouldn't need. Tonight, we're not telling a ghost story. We're dissecting a system, a pattern, a method, a thing that doesn't chase you, doesn't scare you, and definitely doesn't need you to believe in it. Because Phi Kong Koy doesn't win by overpowering you. It wins by waiting for the one thing you cannot avoid, sleep. And by the time you realize that, it's already too late. The forest doesn't belong to you. It never did. You can cut paths through it, hang lights between its trees, mark your territory with tools and noise and confidence. But the moment you lie down and close your eyes, you return to your original role. Something that can be used. Southeast Asian forests, especially the dense stretches that blur the borders between Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia, are not just ecosystems. They're pressure chambers of humidity, decay, and life layered on top of life. The air itself feels inhabited, thick with the scent of wet soil, rotting leaves, and something faintly sweet that doesn't quite have a name. It's the perfect place for things that don't need to be seen. Phi Kong Koy is often categorized as a spirit, a ghost, a remnant of something human. That's a comforting assumption. It implies origin, motivation, maybe even rules you can understand. Unfortunately, none of those are guaranteed. Some accounts suggest it was once human, a person who wandered too far into the forest, stayed too long, and slowly lost structure. Not just physically, but conceptually. Limbs reduced, purpose simplified, hunger refined. Others argue the opposite, that it was never human at all, that Phi Kong Koy is older than the stories, older than the language used to describe it. A native presence in an environment where survival doesn't require intelligence, just efficiency. And efficiency is exactly what it demonstrates. Because if you think about it, its design makes no sense until it makes perfect sense. One leg. At first glance, that's a disadvantage. Mobility reduced, balance compromised. Not exactly what you'd expect from something that needs to approach prey undetected. But Phi Kong Koy doesn't chase. It doesn't need speed. It doesn't need endurance. It only needs proximity. And that single leg, it creates a rhythm, a controlled, repetitive impact against the ground. Not a shuffle, not a crawl, a pattern. Koy, koy, koy. That sound isn't just a byproduct of movement. It is the movement. Consistent, predictable, almost mechanical. And here's the part most people underestimate. The human brain is incredibly good at ignoring patterns, especially repetitive ones. A sudden noise wakes you up. A loud crack, a sharp snap, those trigger alarms. But something steady? Something rhythmic? Your brain files it away as background. Safe, non-threatening. Which means that while you lie there, suspended between sleep and awareness, Phi Kong Koy is doing something very simple. It's teaching your mind to ignore it. Over time, and sometimes it doesn't take long, that sound becomes part of the night. Just another layer in the ambient noise. Just another detail you stop questioning. And once that happens, it doesn't matter how close it gets, because you've already decided it isn't a problem. This is why classifying Phi Kong Koy as a ghost is misleading. Ghosts haunt. Ghosts linger. Ghosts react to emotion, to guilt, to unfinished business. Phi Kong Koy does none of that. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care what you've done. It doesn't even care if you notice it. Because its entire existence is built around one principle. You will eventually stop paying attention. And when you do, that's when it becomes real. Not as a story, not as a warning, but as a system that has already adapted to the one weakness every human shares. You have to sleep. And the forest? It's very good at making sure you do. Phi Kong Koy doesn't hunt the way you expect. There's no chase, no sudden burst of speed, no dramatic moment where you realize you're being targeted and have to run for your life. That kind of predator is inefficient. What Phi Kong Koy does is quieter, slower, and far more reliable. It starts before you even lie down. Long before your eyes close, your body is already broadcasting information, heat, breath, movement patterns. Tiny fluctuations in how you shift your weight, how often you turn, how deeply you inhale. Signals you don't notice, but something else does. It doesn't pick the strongest target. It picks the most stable one, the one who settles fastest, the one whose breathing evens out first, the one who doesn't wake easily. In other words, you. Once it identifies that pattern, it doesn't rush in. That would defeat the entire system. Instead, it begins the second phase, synchronization. Koy, koy, koy. The sound returns, but now it serves a purpose beyond movement. It becomes a metronome, a steady, unchanging rhythm that your brain starts to align with. The more you hear it, the more your body relaxes into it. Your breathing slows to match. Your muscles loosen. Your awareness dulls. It's subtle, almost elegant, like white noise designed specifically for your nervous system. You don't resist it because nothing about it feels urgent enough to fight. And that's exactly the point. By the time Phi Kong Koy gets close enough to matter, you've already accepted its presence as harmless. Now comes the part most people misunderstand. Movement. A creature with one leg shouldn't be able to approach silently. It should stumble, drag, scrape against the forest floor. It should make noise that stands out. But Phi Kong Koy doesn't hide its sound. It disguises it. Each movement produces the same impact, same spacing, same tone. Koy, Koy, Koy. No variation, no escalation. Your brain stops processing it as new information. It becomes background, like the hum of a fan, or distant traffic you no longer notice after a few minutes. And when something becomes background, it becomes invisible. That's how it gets close. Not by avoiding detection, but by redefining what detection even means. When it finally reaches you, there's no dramatic shift, no spike in tension, no sudden realization, just contact, cold, precise. Your foot is the target for a reason. It's the farthest point from your center of awareness. The place least likely to trigger an immediate full-body reaction. Even when you're awake, a touch there can be dismissed. When you're asleep, it barely registers. Your toes might twitch, your ankle might shift slightly, but your brain doesn't escalate the signal. It files it under non-critical. And then, it continues. Not tearing, not forcing, just maintaining contact. Drawing something out of you, slowly, steadily, in a way that doesn't trigger panic. Because panic would wake you up, and waking you up would end the process, which is why Phi Kong Koy avoids it at all costs. This is not an attack, it's a transaction. You provide what it needs, it ensures you remain unaware long enough to keep providing it. And here's the part that makes the system almost impossible to fight. It doesn't need to finish the job in one night. It can come back, again and again, each time you're weaker, slower, easier to synchronize with, easier to keep asleep, until eventually, you don't just ignore the sound, you depend on it, because your body has already adapted to its rhythm. Koy, Koy, Koy. By then, it doesn't need to approach carefully anymore. It doesn't need to be subtle, because the system is already in place, and you're already inside it. You just don't know it yet. You don't notice the moment it starts affecting you. That would be too easy. There's no single night where you wake up and think, something is wrong. No dramatic shift, no clear before and after. Just a series of small adjustments your mind makes to protect you. And, ironically, those adjustments are exactly what make you vulnerable. The first stage is denial. You hear something, faint, repetitive, slightly out of place. Koy, Koy, Koy. Your brain reacts for a split second, a flicker of attention, a question that almost forms. Then it answers itself. It's nothing, because the alternative, that something unknown is approaching you in the dark, requires energy. It requires alertness. It requires you to fully wake up and confront uncertainty. And your brain hates that. So it chooses the cheaper option. It dismisses. This isn't stupidity, it's efficiency. But efficiency in the wrong situation becomes a liability. The second stage is what researchers might call a micro-awakening. You don't fully wake up. You hover. Half aware, half gone. In that fragile state, your senses are active, but your logic isn't. You feel things without properly interpreting them. A shift in temperature, a slight pressure, a presence that doesn't quite fit. Your foot moves slightly, your breathing changes, your body knows something is there. But your mind doesn't commit. And that hesitation? That's all it needs. Because instead of escalating the signal, instead of forcing you awake, your brain does something far more dangerous. It negotiates. It's probably just a branch, maybe an insect. Go back to sleep, and you listen. You always listen. The third stage is adaptation. This is where things become irreversible. The sound, that steady, dry rhythm, just stops being unusual. It becomes expected, familiar, almost comforting in its consistency. Koy, 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 you've heard it before. Nothing bad happened. So your brain updates the pattern. Sound equals safety, not threat. This is how conditioning works. Not through fear, but through repetition without consequence. Except there is a consequence, you just don't associate it with the cause. By the fourth or fifth night, the symptoms start. Subtle at first, you wake up more tired than you should be. Your legs feel heavier, slower, as if something is pulling them down even when you're standing still. Your reaction time dips just enough that you notice, but not enough that you panic. You blame the work, the heat, the environment, anything but the one variable that's been repeating every night. Because that variable has already been categorized as harmless, and the human brain doesn't like reevaluating its decisions. It's stubborn like that. Then comes the final stage. Dependency. This is where Phi Kong Koy stops needing to hide. Because your body has already synchronized. Your sleep deepens when the sound is present. Your breathing stabilizes faster. Your system, without your permission, has accepted that rhythm as part of its resting state. Which means that on the rare night the sound doesn't come, you feel it. Not as relief, but as discomfort. Something is missing. Something feels off. You shift. You turn. You struggle to settle. Because your body is waiting for a signal it has learned to rely on. Koy, Koy, Koy. At that point, it doesn't matter whether you believe in it. It doesn't matter whether you've ever seen it. You've already made space for it. And once something becomes part of your normal, removing it feels wrong. That's the trap. Not fear, not force, but familiarity. Because the moment a threat becomes familiar, it stops being a threat in your mind. Even when it's still feeding on you. And by the time you question it, you won't be asking, what is that sound? You'll be asking, why can't I sleep without it? At some point, you stop asking what Phi Kong Koy is, and you start asking something much worse. Why does it make sense? Because the more you break it down, the less it feels like a creature, and the more it feels like a system you've already encountered before. Not in the forest, in your life. Think about it. A presence that doesn't hit you all at once, that doesn't break you in a single moment of terror, but instead takes something small, almost unnoticeable, over and over again. A pattern you ignore because it never feels urgent enough to confront. A rhythm you adapt to, even when it's draining you. Sound familiar? Phi Kong Koy doesn't just exist in the dark between trees. It exists in the way humans tolerate slow damage. That single leg, that imbalance, shouldn't work. It shouldn't be stable. And yet, it moves forward anyway, efficiently, repeatedly. That's not a flaw. That's a metaphor. You don't need to be whole to function. You don't need to be balanced to survive. You just need a pattern that works long enough. And Phi Kong Koy has perfected that. It doesn't overwhelm. It integrates. It becomes part of the environment, part of your routine, part of the background noise you stop questioning. The same way you stop noticing the hum of electricity in a room, or the constant pressure of responsibility that never fully goes away. You don't fight those things. You adapt to them. And in adapting, you let them stay. Koy, Koy, Koy. A sound that means nothing until it means everything. Because repetition is the most powerful tool any system can use. Not force, not fear, repetition. Do something once, and you'll notice it. Do it twice, and you'll question it. Do it 100 times, and it becomes invisible. That's how habits form. That's how exhaustion builds. That's how something can take from you every single day, without you ever identifying it as the cause. Phi Kong Koy is just a cleaner version of that idea. Stripped of motion, stripped of complexity, just input and output, you sleep, it feeds. You wake up slightly worse, you repeat. And because the change is gradual, because the loss is distributed across time instead of concentrated in a single moment, you accept it. You call it life. You call it stress. You call it being tired. You almost never call it what it is. A system that benefits from your inability to detect slow damage. That's why it doesn't rush. That's why it doesn't escalate. Because escalation creates awareness, and awareness breaks the cycle. Phi Kong Koy doesn't want you afraid. Fear wakes you up. Fear makes you act. Fear disrupts the pattern. What it wants is for you to remain exactly as you are. Comfortable. Predictable. Just aware enough to function, but not aware enough to question. And once you reach that state, it doesn't need the forest anymore. It doesn't need isolation. It doesn't even need darkness. Because by then, the environment isn't what sustains it. You are. And the scariest part? You don't need to believe in Phi Kong Koy for that to be true. You just need to keep ignoring the things that slowly take from you, because they don't hurt enough to stop. Not yet. So, can you survive it? Technically, yes. Realistically. That depends on whether you're willing to fight the one thing your body is designed to do. Sleep. Most traditional advice sounds reassuring on paper. Don't sleep alone. Stay elevated off the ground. Keep a light source nearby. Cover your feet. All reasonable, all logical, and all based on one fragile assumption. That Phi Kong Koy follows rules you can control. Here's the problem. You can't stay awake forever. At some point, your body will shut down. Your awareness will drop. Your guard will slip. Not because you made a mistake, but because you're human. And that's the only opening it needs. You could set alarms, rotate watch shifts, surround yourself with people. But the moment everyone relaxes, even slightly, the system resets. Koy. You won't always hear it. And even if you do, you won't always recognize it as a threat. That's why most encounters don't end in sudden death. They end in something much quieter. Fatigue that doesn't go away. Weakness that doesn't make sense. A slow, steady decline you can't trace back to a single cause. By the time you realize something is wrong, you're already part of the cycle. So let's quantify it. Survival chance, 15%. Not zero, but low enough to be uncomfortable. Because surviving doesn't mean avoiding it completely. It means breaking the pattern, waking up when your body wants to stay asleep, questioning what feels familiar, refusing to ignore something just because it hasn't hurt you yet. And let's be honest, most people won't do that. Because it's exhausting. Because it's inconvenient. Because it's easier to trust that nothing is there. So here's the only advice that actually matters. Tonight, when you lie down, don't just close your eyes and assume you're safe. Listen. Not casually, not passively. Actually listen. Because if you hear something repeating in the dark, something soft, dry, rhythmic, koy, don't follow your instincts. Don't stay still. And whatever you do, don't convince yourself it's nothing. Because the moment you do, you've already made the same decision every victim makes. And that decision, that's the real reason they don't wake up. Sleep well, if you can.